go ahead and open your Bibles to the text of Job. We'll be looking at chapters 38 and 39 today, and then we'll continue looking at this section of the text of Job next week as well, although we'll be passed into chapter 40 at that time. Right now, though, let's go ahead and, as is our habit, begin our study with prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the time we share in spiritual things. We thank you for the reflection of deep study and look into ourselves and into the life of Job and into your wisdom. Help us to learn to lean in and to trust you in the mystery of life. Watch over our souls, and we offer this prayer in your Son's name. Amen. All right, so we're going to really kind of note some really interesting parts of the dialogue that takes place here. I want to point something out. Sometimes when we look at parts of the wisdom literature of the Bible, we are coming to the conversation with a lot of preloaded feelings and emotions because we seek wisdom when we don't understand. And so when we go to the parts of the Bible that we categorize as this is wisdom literature, we often do so, again, saying, I have this really important question and I want to know what to do, what to think, how to feel. It's a lot of the times with Proverbs we do that because Proverbs are shorter packages and we're like, hey, I have this big decision to make. Let me read through my Bible and see what Proverbs has to tell me. The same thing can be true with the Psalms, Song of Solomon or the Psalms. It can be the same with Ecclesiastes. And it happens with Job too. And in Job, sometimes we forget that Job's text may not be trying to answer our question. Would you go to a book written about the poetry of Walt Whitman and ask a question about math? Do you think Whitman's talking about math very much? Is that raise a hand. Is he a math scholar? Nobody agrees that he's a math scholar. He's not. You see, you don't go to that table expecting to get radicals, functions, stats, stellar mechanics. Like, I'm not looking for that from him. I want him to tell me how he feels. The same thing is true on the other end. When I need a math question answered, I go somewhere else. When I need a question on the formation of the universe, I might go somewhere else. But if I need to answer the question that Job keeps asking, and what do you think the question is, by the way? What question has Job been asking all the way through his story?
Why is all this happening to me?
Why is this happening, and why won't God answer me? Why isn't he answering my prayers? Why isn't he responding to my needs? And I thought about this a lot for a number of reasons over the past couple days. Especially some things that Les has brought up in the class at times under the prevailing idea that in the time of Job's life, maybe a lot of people really believed that God was transactional with them. That if you do right, he blesses you. If you do wrong, he curses you, and that's it. That's the only space that exists. And so if something bad happens, it's only because you have rebelled against God and you are cursed or accursed in that sense. I thought a lot about that because Job is, in essence, still asking under that framework. Hey, where's God? I have done all of this, and I have not done any of that. Where's God? So in chapter 37 and chapter 38, the Lord does answer Job. And it is not at all what any of us would be like, oh, I'm so excited to meet God today. This is going to be so great. Because let's just read just a little bit. Job 38, verses 1, 2, and 3. Trenton, do you want to read that for us? You got a good voice. You're in the back seat. You position yourself well. verses 1, 2, and 3.
Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, "Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Dress for action like a man. I will question you, and you will make it known to me."
Whew. So think back in your brains on how Job's friends and Job talk to each other. Were they soft and like really gentle in speech, like super tender in conversation? Or were they using chainsaws and like billy clubs, verbally speaking? A lot of chainsaws, billy clubs, big siren sounds. So when God enters the conversation, we're already kind of primed for a more direct dialogue, right? It's been we could say politely, this has been pretty direct. But this has been direct amongst peers. And Job wants his day literally and on a literary basis in court. I want to be judged in the divine court. And think for a second forward in your knowledge of the Bible and imagine how the court of God is presented in the text of Revelation. It's a magnificent space with not only all of the humanish looking angelic creatures, but even some of the cherubim, which is all the weird looking ones presented in that sense too. And Job has been going, I want to go to that court. I want to show up there. He's got a little ignorance maybe of what he's asking, but he legitimately wants God to hear him. And so when that text happens again, who is this that darkens counsel by words, wait for it, without knowledge, echoing some of the things that have been said earlier. And this is kind of hard to catch a little bit, but out of the whirlwind is an idiom or phrase that is not new. It appears a couple other times in the biblical witness. Psalm 29 is another time where this phrase appears. Ezekiel 1, same phrase is used there. Nahum 1:3, same signature terminology. It is basically the stamp that says, God has stepped into the room. You ever know anybody who could walk into a space and immediately everyone goes, How many of you have stood next to Manute Bol, Shaquille O'Neal, anyone who's a true 7-foot human? 7-foot human is a big thing, right? I'm not accustomed to feeling small. It's just not normally in my experience. But whenever I am next to an actually big human being, the 7-footers in the world, I'm okay, well, this is what the rest of the world feels like all the time. Not sure I like it. Little uncomfortable. Because all of a sudden, your world shifts. And so this term, in literary senses, out of the whirlwind, is trying to help us who aren't there feel small. And it's telling us that we should listen small too. And so everything that happens after this is not math. It's not science. It's relationally designed to get you to go. Now, it doesn't mean there's no literal stuff underneath it and any of those things, and God didn't do these things in any of the ways shaped or fashioned, but he's not talking about that. He's talking about you're small. Big God is here. And so each of the answers of the Lord come from this core idea. Because he's not going to explain why all this happens. He doesn't go in detail to Job and say, well, you know, Job, there was this moment in the other realm where the accuser was walking around and talking about stuff, and he named you by name. Does that happen in the chapter? It doesn't happen in the chapter. But how many of us want that kind of answer to our problems? How much do we want to know? I'm going to tell you, we want to know. Like, I want to know everything. I got a problem. I am the curious cat that's got an issue. I want to know what's going on. But Job doesn't. He doesn't get that. He reframes everything under a different voice. He even skips over talking to these accusers in the context. God doesn't go to the accusers and go, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. Could have. And eventually, effectively will do that. But he doesn't do that either. There's another phrase that's super important to structure our thoughts. In some translations, it is dress for action like a man. But it's an idiom. And the idiom is more familiar, especially if you read like the King James translation, or you're familiar with some of the earlier ways this is rendered. Gird up your loins. Basically, you got to redress yourself for work. How many of you have to wear a uniform to your job or specific work clothes over the years? Like you got to put on some stuff for dirt. A couple of you guys have to like wear work stuff. Overalls, coveralls, you got to show up. Maybe you got to put on some safety equipment. That's kind of what this image is. It's military-ish, but it's the same thing would happen to fishermen. They would move their stuff in different ways to be safer around fishing equipment. My dad, when I was growing up, spent a lot of times going into factories and manufacturing plants. And he was a salesman. But he had to have a hard hat and steel-toed shoes. And so he had...
Safety glasses.
And safety glasses. That's correct. He really rebelled against the safety glasses until his vision kind of went sideways, and then his regular glasses turned into also being safety glasses for him. He got a different set, so you could see and read stuff. But he had steel-toed, Red Wing dress shoes that he hated. But he had to wear them. Had to wear those things because he had to dress for work. The idiom here is not anything to do with gender either, even though we translate it that way. Because independent of gender, you would do the same thing. You would have to do the same mechanics to get ready for the task at hand. It's not a gender issue. It's not I'm going to fight you like a man. It is dress for action. And do so in the mechanics and the imaging of, listen, you're all men here. Why are you sitting around and talking? If you can call God to your court, who do you think you are? That right there is going to really, really kind of press against some of the ideas that we think are important to us. And so the voice that calls from the whirlwind, first thing to think about, God calls Job, but not to Elihu or the friends. How does that make you feel about honest struggle, even if it goes too far? When you're struggling with something and feeling with it, and maybe your struggles push you to a position or a setting that's now you've gone too far. What do you guys think about that? How do we feel about Job's friends right now? Are they still important to Job's circumstances like they once were? Well, they thought they knew everything, right? All of them are saying, I've got the answer for you. Even the one who gets kind of close, still, God just kind of brushes them aside in a literary sense. They become even smaller than Job. But Job's struggle is still real. Job's context is still real. The thing to think about on the heart level is to think of a time when you spoke with certainty about whatever God was doing or was not doing. When that happened, what were you assuming that you knew? When you think about like, hey, why did this happen to me? Why did I have to go through that? Even when you are getting close to the right answer, what are some of the things that you assume that you understand in those moments? I'll say for me, some of it's I'm assuming I understand God's big plans. Why, as a specific thing, why did I leave my 8th grade year with a great friend and then arrived to my 9th grade year and he was gone because he changed a tire on the side of the road in the middle of the night on their trailer and someone just swiped him away. Compassionate, kind, caring human being, farm kid, just lovely person, and he was there at the close of the school year and not there at the beginning of the next year. Why? Any answer I give is going to have to assume that I know what God was doing, right? Even if the question is about his spiritual outcome, I'm still going to have to assume that I know what God is doing. And do I? In that case at all? Man, I got no idea. I still don't have an answer to that question. And I still have a hole in my childhood till today that Robert could have filled. I don't know. No good answer to that question, right? I could have theories. Maybe this, possibly that. But they also could have become hardened like Job's friends. Oh, clearly something in his life is wrong. I have no evidence of that. He was a 14-year-old. Why did Tommy Splitsdozer's truck get mangled and crushed when he decided to speed just a little too fast turning into the traffic? And 5 or 6 other people made some bad decisions and Tommy survived but was crippled for the rest of his days. Why did my friend endure that? I don't know. Did he make choices and there were consequences? Absolutely. Why did he survive and continue life as crippled instead of expiring on the table, which was an option? It almost happened. I don't know. I don't know why my incredibly fit and active friend spends the rest of his life in a wheelchair. We can be in the same spot of Job's friends, even if the questions aren't necessarily about us. And these are real things to me, and you have probably real things to you. Why they happen, I don't know. I don't have good answers to it. The thing that is taking place is a powerful shift because the God who ordered creation is the same God at work in Job's suffering. That order is no less real because Job just can't see it. The story of creation is wild, right? Have you guys read Genesis 1 through 5 recently? It's a wild story. And sometimes out of need, we look at it and think, man, I really wish I could understand the intricacies of how these things took place because I have to answer these philosophical, theological, and scientific questions about human origin to Bible seekers all the time. But if you step 2 steps back and go, wait a minute, this is a story of a God who can create everything and anything, and he's trying to explain it to me in like 3 pages. Maybe it's not trying to do that thing that I really wanted to do, and I feel like I really needed to do, and maybe he's trying to remind me that he's actually just the one who does it. And I'm tiny. But I'm suffering. And I don't understand why. And I need to know that the God who can make all things, who can uphold all things by the word of his power, is also the God who cares about me when I suffer. And in the theological challenge of all of this, it also may be the same God who has put me in the vice of suffering. How many of us love to suffer? I can use the evidence of our capacity to complain about things as an indication that none of us like suffering. We're really good at complaining though, right? How bad is the traffic on Bullsboro? It's bad. It was bad before, it's still bad now. Might be worse, right? How bad is it when your food arrives to the table late and cold? I paid for this to get here on time. I don't know why it's here late and cold. Maybe the guy that was making it fell and hit his head and they had to take him to the ER. I don't know. But I'll complain about it, right? The same God who creates, orders, and blesses may also be the God who puts our life in the furnace, or our life in the press, or our life in the rock. Right next to the hard place, by the way. It's like you're right in the middle of those two things. And he again asks a series of questions that are based in the reality of creation as it exists and as it is seen, but it's basically saying, where were you when that happened? Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Well, I didn't exist. Like, that's the answer, right? It was a non-existing entity. Second question that's related to all of this: how many of you are baffled by the experience of time in light of God's magnificence, omniscience, omnipresence, and lack of beginning and end?
Without understanding to us.
Yeah, Augustine suggests that time is experienced by impressions in the soul, that your soul has an impression of the experience, and that is our only way to measure time from the human calculations, that we remember it. Look, Augustine was a smart dude. I don't know necessarily how I feel about that, but I do know this: I wasn't there at the creation. I have no recollection of it, no knowledge of it, nor does anyone who's living have knowledge of that. No human beings on the planet have knowledge of the creation either. So I have to answer with Job. Squeak, small mouse. If you could eke out a noise. I wasn't there. Because that's the thrust of the idea. I wasn't there. Goes on and makes a series of secondary illustrations of God commanding everything, including one of my favorite things: sunrises and sunsets. Just love them. Don't know why. Love them in all iterations. Parking lot sunrises and sunsets, great. Mountaintop sunrises and sunsets, great. Highway ones where it's coming up on one side and you drive long enough where it goes down on the other side. We'll love it. Love the colors. God saying, hey, I made that. I built that. I fashioned that. Where were you? Well, I'm just here enjoying the ride. That's all I'm doing. Job is getting this reminder, but then he goes even deeper. 16, 17, 18. Gates of death. Earth's breath. Job, have you entered the well springs of the sea? You been there? He uses a strange idiom, seen the gates of death. There's some definite wordplay going on there. And he goes on, declare if you know all this. Speak up. You got the insight? You seen it? Point number one, God isn't being cruel to Job in this. He is a schoolmaster teaching a pupil who needs to learn a substantially important lesson. For all of Job's declaration of his rightness and goodness, Job isn't perfect. He acknowledges it too. Certainly not perfect in his understanding, but he had forgotten or never considered a level of comprehension that well exceeds his own. Because if Job cannot understand creation, how can Job judge or adjudicate the Creator's moral purpose? How many of you really want to sit on juries for the rest of your life? You guys want to be like a professional jurist? Having to make these court case decisions? Not just like all of us want to be a jury on a traffic court. If we were given the right to tell people who speed to stop speeding, I think all of us would be like, especially the ones who cut us off. Like, I want to be on that jury. No, the complicated ones, the hard ones. One of the reasons that we have a jury system as we do in the U.S. is because under the Magna Carta, they actually had professional jurists. Most of them were very wealthy. It was kind of a class system, big problem. But do you want to sit on juries for the rest of your life deciding whether people live or die? Oh, I don't really want that. Judges talk about it in their memoirs about the difficulty of those things. There's a lot of weight to carry. I'd much rather have different things. And Job is trying to act like he should sit on his own jury. That he should be the one defending himself in this sense. So, as part of the question with this, of the thought to think about with it, why does God start with creation rather than going right at Job's suffering? Why do you think God approaches this question, this circumstance this way? Because in essence, what is God trying to do by taking Job on a tour? Let's
remind Job of who he is, who God is,
yeah.
and who Job is.
Yeah, there's a real pressing point that says, hey, we are not the same. One thing might carry the image of another, but it's the image thereof, not the thing. Pulling off of the creation narrative of Genesis. The hard question then to think about, and this is the tough thing on the personal level, where are you holding God hostage in your life as if he owes you an explanation? That's a tough one, right? I gave you two stories from my own life where I would love to have an explanation. I'm not going to get one, but I'd love to have one. Absolutely. How many of you would like to go to the CEO of the company you hate or like a whole lot and ask for them to explain their business? Sometimes we want to do that, yeah? There's a couple companies that made some choices. I'm still holding Chili's accountable for the lack of the Rojo Burger. It's been 20 years, like 25 years probably at this point. Want it back. I'm not going to get an answer. They don't care about me. Silly, right? Now you move into the serious things, your own personal things, the things that have happened. You go, why? Why did I suffer that? When I was 8, why did that 13-year-old treat me the way that she did? I want to know. Don't know. Won't get to know. God doesn't necessarily need my input to make a decision about me. But we feel because of human agency that I get to have a right to tell. I get the right to choose. I get free will. I get the right to feel. But I don't get the right to call God to court and press and push. Even though I kind of feel like I want to. The cosmos exists and runs on laws that no human has set in motion. Yet those laws reflect a God whose care far exceeds anything Job has imagined. Job's world is Job. His family, his land, his livestock. God is caring for a cosmos that cares for everything. The whole universe. The sun, the moon, the stars, however they are arranged and held in the sky, all of those things, God cares. Handles that. You guys heard the phrase cognitive overload? It's a fancy word. I can't think about other things right now because I'm thinking about too many things. I can only do I'm going to start a fight right now. Please forgive me. I don't believe in multitasking. I know that people, I can multitask. No, you can do a number of things all in a row that are different things. And if I tried to do that, I would do all of them poorly. I can do one thing well, and then I do another thing well. I'm not multitasking. I'm monotasking. If you believe in multitasking, go with yourself. You can do things that I can't do. I don't believe. Right? Could I even begin to handle God's world? Like, I'm a monotasker. Could I handle God's things? Those of you who believe that you're multitaskers, could you handle 100 things at once? 200 things? 500 things? Have we reached the edge of your cognitive load? 1,000 things? 1,000,000 things? How many insects exist on the planet? I'm not even sure they know. I just learned that there's massive clonal sections of plant matter that are all the same plant, and the largest plants exist as a single cloned, self-cloned is the way they propagate, reef of grasses in Australia is like the largest single mass of an organism on the planet. That's how they exist. If you go to Utah, there's a section of trees that are all the same tree existing on the same root section. And all the pines that poke up from it are coming from about a 10,000-year-old root system. A new press pine sprout comes up about 15 meters tall on a regular basis from that same existing, and God handles all of that. Manages all of it. Job is all about Job's circumstance. Substantial, important, relevant. But the tour that he gets taken on by God reminds him that this is not how it is. This is not all that there is. He even goes to the stars and the skies in the end of chapter 38 and says, "Can you loose the belt of Orion?" Pulling off of the way in which humanity has viewed the stars. Can you do that? Can you touch the stars and undo his belt? Even then, at the close, light and darkness emanate from God's design. Snow and hail, wind and flood and rain, even the stars, even lightning, even wisdom comes fully and functionally from the God who holds and contains all things. If you step aside from trying to figure out the sciencey side of some of these illustrations that he's using, and saying, what does he mean with storehouses of snow and rain? And ask a different question. Why does he have it described that way? Not what does he describe? That's the science side of stuff, but the why. Why does he describe that there is a storehouse of snow and hail reserved for days of trouble? What does that tell you about how God governs the world if he has a storehouse of wind, hail, snow, rain? Is hail ever used in the Bible as a punitive tool? Anyone have their crops and animals damaged by hail in the Old Testament? In Egypt, perhaps? You ever been hit by a hailstorm? Ever bought a hail-damaged car? You kind of should. They're cheap. They just look like a golf ball. Probably fly better. Physics probably work in their favor. But hail can be incredibly damaging, especially when it gets up to golf ball size. We had a storm like that come through the area about a few years ago. Had a nice little experience for all the houses that it swathed through. Didn't want to be hit by it. God is suggesting with that image that the why that he has these is for the what and not about the how. I have them to control and constrain the world. It's one of the tools that the Creator God, Elohim, uses. There's a part of the Bible that gets really easy to get these images together where you remind yourself that the way in which Israel has presented their God is that he is a creator and sustainer of all things. He's the builder and holder of all things. And so a lot of the imaging that the prophets then use are built upon this thing of God made. And he's got this tool he's going to use. By the way, he also says that other nations are used in the same way. Everything and anything in his toolbox is used to constrain and control the world. Now that would also dig at one last corner before we go too deeply. Do you think Job's friends understood that God used the world that way to judge the world? Used the world to judge the world? Maybe. Not properly, for sure. But did Job understand that he too was one of the tools of God's creation? I don't think so. Do we kind of see some of that now? That he is a tool of God's creation? How many of you are content to go home today and look at your life and go, all of this could be used tomorrow as a tool of God's creation to do whatever God needs it to be done? And I could be in the wine press that squeezed out Job. I'm not choosing that life. That's not a choice that I'm going to intentionally select and say, check that box, go ahead. But if my heart is subservient to the God who makes all things, my heart then probably needs to get to a point where I accept the possibility, the potential, that God needs me to do something that I don't want to do. As a youth under the age of 18, how many of us thrived when the authority figures in our lives said, clean your room? I don't know why that's a curse, but apparently it is. Oh, clean the place where I live, instead of living in the cesspool that I have designed. I didn't like it. What it was said to me. Nobody I've ever said it to has rejoiced at the prospect of cleaning their room. Even when help is offered. Oh, I'm going to fall down on the floor like it's a peaceful revolt and I'm going to go limp. We all do this. But yet, my God who made me may ask me to do the thing I do not wish to do. Job didn't desire any of these things. Job's suffering, then, is happening inside a story that he and we do not have the full text of. Because even though God opens the blinders on the edges of Job's story, he's just stretched our understanding a tiny little bit. I don't get to know exactly when this happens. I don't know who the first audience is that reads it. I don't know the world that's around it. I don't know what's going on Orion's belt. Don't got a clue. I just know Job needs to know he can't undo it. He can't reach it, can't touch it. I don't get to know the intricacies of the foundation of the world. I just know that Job and I weren't there. And this is part of what that big picture of wisdom is trying to get us, especially as you move into chapter 39, verses 1 through 8, the mountain goats, the wild donkey, the wild ox, the ostrich. As described in the text, she abandons her eggs. We would consider that unwise, right? But it's by design. She fears nothing, and yet when she runs, she outpaces the horse. God designed her of wisdom and gave her speed And yet this creature goes against the sensibilities of human wisdom. The giant sequoias of the West Coast are a wild, wild thing. They are pioneer species in the sense that they can exist best when no one else is around. So in order to propagate, the first thing you need is a low-intensity fire. So the forest has to burn to make more of them. The things that happen in that context is all the underbrush has to be burnt off. Ash kind of helps too. You know what the heat of the fire does? It opens the pine cones. Enough so that when they drop, the seeds will come out. That's not the only part of that weird system. There's also some grubs that are only existence in that environment who eat the pine cones to loosen up the little fronds too. And they suspect that it has to have both. The fronds have to open up, and the fire has to come, and the squirrels have to come to knock them and make them go loose and set them down as well. So one of the oldest and largest single organisms on the planet can only propagate when the weirdest counterintuitive things happen. Parasitic grubs eat at their pine cones. Fire that would kill them if it got too hot has to occur. Foliage has to be removed. And it has to happen at the right times for germination so that when those little scrubs happen, they don't get eaten up by all the other critters that like to eat them, including the same squirrels that are necessary for the seedlings to drop. God's context, ostrich, donkey, ox, and even horse, hawk, and eagle exist in the same large conundrum that he's trying to get them to understand. Who provides? Who provides for this creation? Is Job walking around and doing that? Now, this also had one more connection back to the creation story, which matches what God is doing here. What's Adam and Eve's primary job in the garden? To manage. But as you start thinking about the scope of creation, is their management capable of replacing God's part? No. And that's partly what Job needs to know. Even if Job's mysteries were to become known to him, all the wise, he still would only know what mattered to Job, because the scope and the scale far exceeds anything that he's looking at. The Psalm 8 in particular, a few of the other Psalms, remind us that God holds the nations in his hands, the world in his hand, comprehensively taking care of us. In the same way that God in the flesh talks to humanity in the preaching of Christ, Job is getting a visual sermon on what God does to take care of him and all of humanity. Jesus then makes it highly interpersonal when talking to an audience and says things like, the hairs on your head, I got them numbered. All the birds of the field, take care of those. Birds of the sky, animals of the field, got them. Flowers, take care of them. Do you notice the rain produced a lot of shoots this morning? A lot of new flowers blooming that weren't blooming just a couple of days ago. Did you guys do anything for that? We may have tried. We may have tried to propagate them and shook them and pollen pop from one plant to another. We don't make a mechanism. That's all inclusive in the answer that the Lord is giving to Job. You weren't there, but behold, I made. Behold, I crafted. Behold, I conditioned, including you. And unfortunately, you're suffering too. That's it for our time this morning. We'll continue reading forward as we look at the texts of chapter 40 and 41 next Sunday. Make sure that sometime between now and then you're reading through those passages. I'll also, as I've been doing, send out a reminder about it.